We're going to talk about risk and prevention today. And much of our course is really centered around these two ideas, even though maybe we haven't used these words so far. I'm just going to repeat some things we've seen before, but more people report histories of child abuse, more girls. Much of, or many of the cases of child abuse are neglect, like 4 times as many as the most frequent other alternative. We know that some things predict abuse. So if we're looking at our high-risk group, and that's this one here, this top line, but even each of these three top lines, they're more likely not to live with one of their birth parents. They're more likely to have symptoms of a mood or anxiety disorder, and more likely to have higher rates of disorder or comorbidity. So these are things that if we are seeing these things in a child in our office, we should go, ooh, need to do something here. So there are two different approaches to health problems. That of the medical model, which focuses primarily on the individual, and focusing on how to help them, although there's some recognition that we need to do something also. The emphasis is on diagnosis and treatment for this individual, often in a medical situation. On the other hand, the public health approach focuses on the population at large with the public service focus. Although we're also aware of how we need to be concerned about the individual. It's a lot of focus on prevention and health promotion. And we're, using interventions aimed at creating a healthier environment, healthier behavior, healthier lifestyle, and medical care. So before we go much further, let me just say that prevention is really in all of our best interests. Preventing ACEs, preventing overdoses and suicide can really do a number of different things, including increasing economic productivity, lowering healthcare costs, creating more effective programs and services, and longer lifespans with better quality of care. So let's think about the diathesis stress model, which some of you may have seen elsewhere. But from the diathesis stress model, we're talking about two things. We're talking about, on the one hand, the genetic vulnerability, the biological vulnerability that a person already has, and also what happens in the environment. So you and I were not identical at birth, but what happened after that made a difference. Even if we had been identical twins, we would be different later on because of the kinds of stressors that we have. And so what this model says is, depending on the amount of genetic tendency to become an alcoholic, for example, and the amount of stressors that someone experiences, that may push someone over the edge so that they become an alcoholic, as opposed to someone who has a relatively low genetic tendency, and perhaps a quieter college in terms of drinking. So what we're saying here is that we're coming back to our biopsychosocial model, that there is this biological piece, hormones, neurotransmitters, activity of our HPA and SAM centers. The social setting, so how does our family support us, our community support us, what's going on in the school, what's going on at the doctor's office, and also our psychological factors. Do we believe that we can make a difference? Do we believe that we can get better, that we have self-worth? That do we, what's our level of problem-solving ability, et cetera. And trauma can impact each of these. So thinking again from a public health perspective, we want to recognize the kinds of risks for child abuse and neglect. These are child factors, including young children are more at risk. Children with disabilities or health problems tend to stress families out more, and they're more likely to respond in negative ways. And having a previous history of abuse, again, for the same reasons, puts a child at greater risk. Parental factors, having young parents, parents who are ill-informed about parenting, mental health problems, put them at risk. Family factors, so being a single parent, having domestic violence in the home, emotional and financial stressors. Or environmental factors, such as poverty, social isolation, community violence, et cetera. All of these can play a role in terms of what's, putting a child at risk of abuse. On the other hand, there are things that can strengthen the families and protect children. So helping children develop self-regulation skills, relational skills, problem solving, being involved in positive activities like scouts, relational level, things like helping parents develop positive competencies, having supportive adults, helping them to become good parents, having good friends who value and support parenting well. And at a societal community level, things like a positive community, positive schools, environments, economic opportunities, and jobs. So we want to be addressing these things and not just focusing here, but focusing throughout. So with that child and with the family, we may want to help them build stress tolerance. That tolerance develops when we experience stress that's predictable, moderate, and controllable, at which point we become more resilient. And on the other hand, if we experience a situation that's unpredictable, extreme, and prolonged, we're more likely to be sensitized and feel vulnerable, feel on edge all the time. So from this public health perspective, there are at least 3 different ways of intervening. We can prevent the problem, which is primary prevention. So we might, for example, remove risk factors beforehand. So maybe recognize that this is a teenage parent and put an adult in the home, a home health care worker who just drops by and listens and maybe helps them identify more positive ways of handling parenting. Secondary prevention is when we recognize the problem and nip it in the bud. Now, we want to recognize the problem as early as possible and prevent it from progressing. The further along it gets, the more complicated it becomes to remove. Here, this person may develop a series of different kinds of habits for how to respond to situations that may not be very helpful. And in addition, they may not have built the skills for dealing with a world that might otherwise be helpful. So we've talked about Magda before, so I'm not going to, really push this a whole lot. But remember, Magda, her mother died, and she talked about her friends distancing themselves. Her father distanced himself, in part because he had to, and in part because it was a coping strategy. What we might do is think about primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention here. Primary prevention might be stepping in and doing something for Magda at the same time that we're treating her mother for cancer. Secondary prevention might occur in the school, for example. So the school is saying, Magda's grades have started to drop. She's not attending as regularly as she used to. Maybe we need to do something at this point. And tertiary might be after her mom died and she's already attempted suicide once. So when we're thinking about how to deal with people with or how to prevent problems, we want to be thinking two things or three things. We can do some things that address the entire population. So for example, billboards address the entire population. We might address specific subgroups that are at risk. So we might post certain kinds of public service announcements relative to particular kinds of TV shows or reality shows. We might, try and involve, or we might, try and involve whatever we can with certain kinds of populations. Every child who has a parent in prison, perhaps we also try and set up with, big brother, big sister. And high risk, we may want to be thinking about, these are people who we expect are going to be very at risk, and what can we do for them right now? And with this, I'm going to step out, and I'll see you in the next video where we're talking about community issues and community interventions. Take care. Bye-bye.